Mr. Tony Gosling in to continue this discussion. Do you believe that the world actually got this message?
Yes, I think they did. I mean, what was going on actually is blatant provocations. I mean, this is the idea that you can just seize an Iranian tanker on its way to Syria at the behest of the Americans, 4 or 5,000 miles away in the Mediterranean Sea, just shows how arrogant the United States is, and actually how subservient the British are. I mean, we've seen the same with Huawei, the decision this week to ban this Chinese technology at the behest of the Americans. The British just cave in. But actually, at the time, it was the British Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt that had been responsible for this decision to seize the Gibraltar Iranian tanker. It's very good to see that the Iranians will bite back, if you want, in a non-threatening way, saying, well, look, if you can seize our tankers, we can seize yours. I think it makes it clear to the world that Iran is not a pushover. And I think we have actually in Britain a lot of camaraderie with the Iranians. We're both very much maritime nations. We've both had old empires years ago, yours possibly a bit further back in the past than the British Empire. But, we should be working together in these matters. And actually, I think it was the former ambassador to Uzbekistan, Craig Murray, who resigned on principle over the British using torture. He was also one of the former heads of maritime law at the Foreign Office that pointed out all these facts in Britain. The fact that it was quite within the Iranian powers to stop this British tanker, whereas actually it wasn't supposed to be in their powers in Gibraltar to seize the Iranian tanker, so that they actually broken maritime law in Gibraltar, but the Iranians hadn't. Now, that guy was one of the experts in Britain in maritime law, Craig Murray, and yet his take and his analysis was not reported in the British press anywhere. Nobody reported it. I reported it on my radio show, which has now been closed down. So you can see one of the major issues here is these provocations can happen. Tankers can be seized with no proper analysis going on whatsoever in the Western press. And the West likes to point at other countries such as Iran and China and say, oh, your media is so controlled and so biased. And as I've just explained there, our media in the West is also very, very controlled and biased. And if such a basic explanation about the workings of international law when it comes to tankers cannot be explained by a former British ambassador to the British people and to the English-speaking world, you can see that the poison has entered the system of the Western media.
Thank you very
Effectively,
much.
the media is the world's nervous system, and once you've got poison in that nervous system, it's like sarin gas. It will just destroy any possibility for the truth and peace. And so I think the Iranians did the right thing, seizing that tanker and releasing it too.
And they did send the message that they want to the world. And a proof for that, Mr. Khoshcheshm, is that we know that Iran has been quite active in conducting long-range deployments, including most recently oil tankers that were sent to Venezuela. Do you believe that it was this incident that paved the way for Iran to take such actions?
Well, somehow, probably, but
let's not forget that Iran was under a lot of threat by the U.S. for doing so.
Yeah, I know. But as I said, since last May, actually, or the one before last, 14 months ago, actually, Iran shifted as a strategy to a tit-for-tat policy, saying that it's not naive, it's not weak, and it insists on its rights, and free trade and commerce and free maritime trade is one of the rights that Iran is entitled to. So Iran actually showed that it's resolved to move on and along a new path and strategy, as it was and is still under the United States maximum pressure policy. So it shows that its resolve is firm. It stands very firmly to do trade, and it would not be subdued by the United States. Well, when if you just take a look at the date that Iran sent its cargoes to Venezuela, you would understand that it came at the end of the period of the efficiency of the maximum pressure policy the maximum pressure policy or maximum pressure sanctions has an efficiency period of maximum 2 years, and Iran sent the cargoes exactly at the end of the 2 year period in May. It's very important because it's sending a lot of messages to the West. It's also showing that Iran is not.
Mr. Khoshcheshm. Well, Mr. Ghassan, let's continue the discussion with you. Do you agree with Mr. Khoshcheshm that Iran is sending lots of messages to the world by conducting such long-range deployments?
Yes, the thing is that, as everybody knows now, the West is preparing to back Israel in a major Middle Eastern war. I mean, we've seen this, haven't we, in the past? But we mustn't mince words here. This could be disastrous for the planet, and I think it's really important, actually, that Iran has made it absolutely clear that it is prepared to fight. It's not just going to give in, that it is actually prepared to take on some of its adversaries. And I'm really glad to see that. It's very important. I'd also just like to add that this whole idea of tanker wars has been something that the West has been playing with for decades. They've known that this is a potential going to happen in the future, that there is going to be the ending of oil supplies through a Middle Eastern war. And they've made sure that much of their investments have been in things like electric cars. We're seeing a lot of that rolling out now. So the same people that controlled the oil supply are also now controlling the technology and owning the technology which is supposed to replace it. And of course, they're now wondering, aren't they? This is the financial incentive for war I'm talking about here. They're wondering, well, actually, if everybody suddenly has to go over to electric cars and this sort of thing, then maybe a war would be good because our share prices would go through the roof for electric cars. So there's a very cynical game being played here on the financial markets and by financial investors, I'm afraid, that actually a war could be good for business. So I think it's very important that Iran sends a signal that if there are these sorts of provocations going on, that there'll be a very, very strong response. And by the way, the former CIA station chief in Cairo, a guy called Miles Copeland, he wrote a book called A Game of Nations about these sorts of tanker wars and provocations. But you know what? It wasn't just a book. He and the CIA turned it into a board game, so you can play these games. In fact, you can probably buy it on eBay if you wanted to. It's called the Game of Nations board game, where you control Middle Eastern countries using oil rigs and tankers. And these are the kinds of things that were going around in American heads in the 1970s. We're now seeing some of those war games, much more serious, coming to fruition with the tanker wars over the last 2 years.
Thank you very much. Mr. Khoshcheshm, where do Russia and China stand in Iran's maritime strategies?
Well, they know it pretty well that if the United States is defeated or wins this confrontation, either conclusion would mean the same to them. I mean, if the United States could defeat Iran, they would go for exercising similar threats and provocations and strategy against the Chinese, as they see China their main rival in area of economy, and they are doing everything to stop them. That was the doctrine that was started under President Obama. They say that they have been focusing on the Middle East too much, and they have forgotten about China all along these 20 years. Their main plan was chaos in the Middle East in order to bring up their own and establish their own order, which included disorder and chaos and wars and friction everywhere throughout the Middle East, so that they could have a free hand to deal with China. They would shift their strategy and the focus of their deployment, military deployment, to the Chinese water as well. But the Chinese know it pretty well. They know that they should expand cooperation with Iran in order to stand against Donald Trump as well as the United States. The Russians also know it. When they assassinated a top Iranian general on a mission, a peaceful mission, to a third country like Iraq, there is no reason to believe that they would not do the same to a Chinese or a Russian or any other one, general from any other country. So everyone is now looking at Iran. You know, when Iran shut down their global hawk last year at around this time, that was the second incident actually, which was of paramount importance. The Chinese themselves, were astounded, and they were telling their Iranian counterparts that we are now looking at you in a completely different way because we never believed that all your threats and standing against the United States would, go to such extents and you would shoot down the global hawk of the United States in the Persian Gulf. Iran has showed its resolve to the world. At the same time, it has shown that it doesn't want escalation of tensions. It just does want to, do free trade and commerce. But as history has shown all throughout the last 4 decades, there is a tit for tat. Iran is probably the only country that has not left any blow by the United States and its allies unanswered. Whenever it has come under threat and it has, been struck by a U.S. Hostile action, it has reciprocated that. No matter it, declares it officially or not, it would not let it go. Let me give you one last word. When Iran was sending these 5 tankers, as far as I know, this has not been officially declared. This is what I know as a journalist, that one of these tankers was on the way in the Atlantic when the U.S. warships approached the vessel, the tanker. 2 Iranian armed drones started flying, doing maneuvers to show them that they should never approach to seize the ship or approach the ship with hostile intentions. And they stopped and they moved back and they never came to the Iranian ship because they know that Iran has many options and possibilities, not only in the Persian Gulf, not only in the Middle East, all throughout the world. Iran has capabilities in many different areas to reciprocate any kind of hostile action by the United States. And this is the world, actually, as you just mentioned about Chinese as well as Russians, this is the world that needs to take action against the United States' illegal provocations, escalation of tensions, including what they claim to be sabotage actions in Iran. In some cases, this could be the case, but in some others, they are so arrogant and they are so insisting on provoking Iran into action that they claim responsibility for even incidents, natural incidents like fire in the woods. Whatever happened, whatever fire happens, breaks out in Iran, they claim responsibility, saying that, through their social media influencers and, official websites and media, mainstream media in the West, that there is an Israeli or an American hand in these actions and it's been a sabotage. While we do know it's a summertime, the same way that there are many fires in the woods in California as well as other places in the U.S. The same happens everywhere,
much,
including
Mr.
Iran. But they are so arrogant that they intend to stress that they want to provoke Iran. Sure, all their strategies know that the same way Iran is reciprocated through the seizing of the ship, through the shooting down of the global hawk, and as well as the missile strikes on Ain al-Assad that came after the assassination of Lieutenant General Qasem Soleimani, Iran has showed that it's very much resolved to reciprocate any kind of hostile action. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. We're running out of time and we have to say goodbye. I'm very sorry. We would have loved to have Mr. Gosseling's final remarks also, but we don't have time for that. Mr. Gosseling, investigative journalist out of Bristol, and also Mr. Mostafa Khoshcheshm, journalist and political commentator out of Tehran. Thank you very much to both of you for your comments, and thanks to all of our viewers for following this edition of The Debate.